Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2005 animated film Corpse Bride. Now, I know this one has a lot of fans. There's even people who even like this more than The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I gotta be honest, I've always been a bigger fan of Nightmare Before Christmas than this. But, there were certain aspects of it that I don't mind and I like. And at the end of the day, it's still a film that I would say that I am a fan of, but I definitely am not like a massive fan of the film. I like the movie, but I definitely didn't love it. And before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Corpse Bride, I would like to give a special shout out to John for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. A link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, Corpse Bride is directed by Mike Johnson and Tim Burton. Now, it's another one of those collaborative efforts sort of things, where Tim Burton was the one that was the guy responsible for the bulk of the vision for the film in terms of how he wanted certain scenes showcased or brought to life or handled in terms of the camera work or just in general. But he wasn't really the one doing a lot of the direction. That was actually Mike Johnson. So Mike Johnson was doing the bulk of the work while he was just collaborating with Burton and ensuring that his vision wound up on the screen. And I think the two of them collaborated really well together. They seem to have a good feel for one another. And the direction in this, for the most part, is pretty dynamic, pretty strong, pretty good stuff. Especially for a stop motion animated film, it definitely has a signature Burton style to it in terms of the way that the camera floats around or moves around and sometimes in a natural fashion. It's definitely very gothic looking film, and the direction definitely does tap into that vibe very well. Since it is a stop motion animated film, the direction is definitely a little bit different in terms of its framing and overall structure than a live action film. But it still has some really nice looking shots that really showcase the beauty of the animation and the work by the stop motion artists and the puppeteers. And there's some sweeping camera work at points that really do emphasize the dark gothic setting of the film. And there's a lot of moments in it where the energy is really good and isn't lifeless by any means. Like, you don't get like lifeless corpse directing in this. Like, it's very dynamic, very lively, very fun, and definitely something that really does tap into a lot of the more over the top, macabre aspects of the overall plot and the film itself. There's also some really nice moments of comedic timing as well when it comes to the visuals. And some good physical stuff involving the puppets and their movements and so on and so forth. The screenplay by John August, Caroline Thompson, and Pamela Petler. I think this is a pretty good script, but I personally don't find it to be a great script. And the reason for that is that this is, in a lot of ways, a musical in sort of the same vein as Nightmare Before Christmas. And unlike Nightmare, there's only like one song that I thought was really that great, and that was Remains of the Day. The other songs were pretty bland to me, kind of forgettable, didn't really have a lot of memorable notes or elements to them. And it's also a comedy, and there's a lot of dark comedy in this in terms of like puns about dead bodies and the typical sort of stuff you might expect for something called Corpse Bride. But there are moments where it'll make your eyes roll with the puns. But there are some moments with the comedy where it really is actually pretty witty and pretty funny. But there are other moments though where the comedy falls a little flat. The plot, it's kind of drawn out. So what you have is this typical sort of thing involving a couple that is supposed to be set up to be married. It takes place during the Victorian era, and so you have this young woman named Victoria Everglot, who is now a fiance of this um, other man, this good-natured, timid man named Victor Van Dort. And so they're supposed to be set up to be married, but Victor is very uncomfortable with the vows, and he doesn't really know how to say them properly, and he's very shy and awkward, and the wedding rehearsal is a disaster. He runs away, and he winds up going into the woods later that night, and he is practicing his vows, and he says his vows, and he puts the ring on a tree, and somehow that leads to this corpse bride popping up out of the ground and agreeing to the vows. So now he's married to a corpse bride named Emily, and she takes him with her to the underworld, and there's a lot of spooky skeletons and different sort of people, who are not necessarily decomposing, but they're definitely blue in the face, or they're definitely showcasing some signs of death. And there's a lot of skeletons, though. A lot of it's very skeleton heavy when it comes to the look of people in the Corpse Bride's um, idea of the underworld. And it's kooky and it's spooky and ooky and fun. And I will give the script this. I think once you really start to have these characters interacting with the underworld and you have Victor experiencing all of this for the first time, it's a lot of fun and it's rather entertaining. But when you cut back to the stuff that's happening outside of the underworld in the world above, it's not as compelling and it's not as entertaining. There's a lot of drama with the Everglots and the Van Dorts. There's this other guy who appears, who this guy's basically a obvious villain. Um, so you have this man who appears, and he is this he's a murderous con artist. That's basically what he is. Barkus. So Lord Barkus. And you have stuff with him, and you have stuff with the Everglots, and they don't like the Van Dorts, and they don't like Victor anyway, so they decide to set up a wedding where Emily is gonna marry Barkus. You find out that Barkus actually was the one that killed Emily after her wedding with him. So he's a murderous con artist now, and not just a regular con artist. So there's a bit of extra stakes there. But because Victor finds out that she's gonna get his fiance is going to get married to Barkus, he just decides after running away and after trying to escape from Emily and not wanting to commit to their marriage, he decides to commit to it fully. And so now all of the skeletons and the other people that are a part of the underworld, they decide to go up to the world above and have a big wedding between Emily and Victor, because Victor has to take a poison and die within a certain time frame for the wedding and the marriage to actually work. But of course, predictably, things turn out the way that you would expect. Uh, uh, Emily gets cold feet. Well, really, what she does, she sees that Victoria is, I believe that's her name. Yeah, Victoria. She's not actually going to get married to Barkis. And because of that, Emily feels like the best thing to do is to prevent Victor from killing himself and marrying her, because Emily truly isn't Victor's true love. It's Victoria. So she decides to do this really nice act, and that enables her to be able to be set free and go to heaven. Because I think like this whole thing with the skeletons and all this other stuff, I think it might be some kind of purgatory of some sorts, where the dead reside before they go up to a higher plane or go down below. um Barkis gets his comeuppance, where the skeletons, the ghouls, they attack him after he drinks the poison, because he thinks he's drinking some alcohol and giving some kind of selfish toast to him, essentially outsmarting everybody, but really he's a moron and kills himself. Uh, and you have the wedding between Victor and Victoria. Um, Which I think that happens later, or that was intended to happen, but I don't know if it even actually happened in the actual version of the film that was shown in theaters. They just, you know, they are agreeing to marry, but you don't actually see the wedding. I think in the original draft of the script, you actually do see the wedding. But yeah, there's not really a lot of things that happen in terms of the ending of it that is anything that's like that unpredictable, or anything of that sort. And honestly, I feel the romance between Victor and Victoria, it's not as strong as the romance between Victor and Emily, because there's a lot more scenes involving Victor bonding with Emily. Like the scene where they're bonding by playing a duet together on the piano, and other moments like that. You don't really have enough moments between Victor and Victoria where you really feel like they are the ones that should be together. They're the ones that are madly in love with one another. It's just implied, but it's not really anything that's that solidified. I think the script really needed to have like at least one extra scene with Victor and Victoria bonding. I don't know, after the rehearsal goes wrong, or before the rehearsal, she and Victor decide to go meet at the park, and they talk and they laugh and they share some a shared love for something, or some hobby, or some sort of thing like that, and they connect on a deeper level. But you don't really get anything like that. So all it really comes across as is just typical puppy love. So it really doesn't really feel like it's anything that's really that concrete in terms of their relationship being set in stone and they're destined to be together, and the corpse bride is a wedge between them. Like, it doesn't, you don't really feel that that wedge is that strong. And I think that's a pretty key part of this story. But I think it does a good job with Emily in particular, although I do wish that she was the one though that really got the final stab or um blow on Barkus, because yeah, she did stab him a little bit, but like she isn't the one that ultimately takes him out. It's like everybody. I'm like, no, she's the one that should have the right to take him out because he killed her. So like I really feel that that's another thing that's not quite as good as it could be when it comes to the screenwriting. There's also some stuff involving some other side characters that just do nothing for me. There's this spider that's a friend of Emily's, and there's this worm that hangs out in her head like it's her conscience, and it's some really lame Peter Lorre impression. I think that might have been something that Burton wanted because he's a fan of that actor, but it just they've done Peter Lorre impressions in animation and in films in general, especially comedies, way too much. And by this point, it was already really dated in terms of doing another like Peter Lorre shtick. And there's other characters like the priest, for instance. It seems like that character could have more to do, and there's more to the character, but he's just in it for like maybe a couple scenes. And you also feel like the family of Victor isn't really that strong when it comes to their characters, and neither is Victoria's parents. Like Victoria's parents are supposed to be like these antagonists, but they're not really that memorable or fun to watch. They're just awful people, like, but not in a way that's entertaining. The same thing goes for, Barkus. Like, there really isn't a clear and strong antagonist either. That's another issue that I have with this script. There's no clear and strong antagonist here. You're like, I don't know who it is. Like, who is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be Barkus? Is it supposed to be the Everglots? Is it supposed to be the Corpse Bride? It just seems like it's sometimes all of those things. They are all the antagonists at one point, and it's like I'm like, just pick one. Like you don't need to have the Corpse Bride be a semi-antagonist, and then have Barkus, and then have all this other stuff with the Everglots. But there's also some other characters that I wish would have been expanded upon more, like the Elder, who's the ancient rickety skeleton who I guess rules over the underworld. Like maybe a little bit more backstory and depth on who he is or who he was. That would have been interesting. There's a lot of things that they could have done to make things a little bit more interesting, a little bit more in depth in terms of some of these characters, but you don't really get a lot of that. Other than maybe Emily when it comes to her backstory and what happened to her and why she wound up in the position that she was to be able to get married in the first place to Victor. But there are some really sweet moments in it that I think really do shine in this script. The nice little moments of bonding between Victor and Emily, the scenes where you think that the townspeople are gonna be horrified and try to attack these walking corpses, but then it turns out to be a moment where the dead are reunited with their loved ones, and you have scenes where you know there's like a Gone with the Wind parody where this older skeleton sees his older wife, and at first she's freaked out, but then then he just reveals that he's her husband, her long dead husband, and they embrace, and she's like, "But you're dead." It was like, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." Like, yeah, yeah, stuff like that. Like that was sweet. That was rather charming. And there's a lot of charming little bits of humor as well. Like I definitely wanna give it a lot of credit for those aspects of the script, because there are some genuinely funny moments in this screenplay. Like, the whole bit with, Christopher Lee's priest character when the corpses are first, getting ready and have appeared on they've appeared on the ground above. They come out of the underworld, and now they're in our world, and they're walking around amongst the living, and they're getting ready to set up for the wedding, and they're going to the church, and the priest is all like, "Get back! Back! Back, you demons from hell, from whence you came!" And then you have, the uh, you know, good-natured, well-mannered ghouls who are all like, "Keep it down. We're in a church. Evening." Like that cracks me up. So there's definitely some moments in this script that are great and really good. But there's other moments that are just not really that special to me. A lot of this film, I think, is very aesthetic heavy when it comes to uh, what it brings to the table. It's very aesthetic heavy and style over substance, and I think some people feel the same way about Nightmare Before Christmas. But I've always felt like that had a better script and story than this, and it definitely had better musical numbers as a whole. There are a lot of points in this where you're like, "Why is this a musical?" Like, I honestly feel this would be better if it wasn't a musical. But I still think for the most part, it's a it's a pretty good script. I just think that it could have been a little bit better for the reasons that I mentioned already. Now, the voice cast, I don't think you can get any better than what you have here. I mean, Johnny Depp as Victor Van Dort, perfect casting. I mean, even the stop motion model for his character looks like Johnny Depp. Uh, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like what he did with Ichabod Crane and Sleepy Hollow, but with like a little bit more timid aspects to the character. For the first time he's ever done any voiceover work, he did an incredible job. He did a great job bringing this character to life, making it his own, bringing out a lot of the different nuances of the character, making the character into a very solid and effective lead and protagonist, and definitely brought a lot of the endearing qualities out of the character as well, which is what you definitely needed in order to make this film work. Helena Bonham Carter, I know this is at the point when she was like in almost everything the Burton ever did, but this is some of her best work, in my opinion, in terms of her performance voicing Emily the Corpse Bride. She was charming and cute, but also funny and very passionate, and just a really strong voiceover performance. Emily Watson as Victoria, it's fine, but the character is not really that well written. At least there's not a lot of depth to that character. So she does the best that she can, and definitely does bring the sweet natured aspects of the character into the fray, but it's not really a performance that is really that strong or memorable. Tracey Ullman is an incredibly, immensely talented actress and performer, and she does a good job playing Nell Van Dort and Hildegard. Um, but it's not really in one of those roles either that has a lot for her to work with. Same thing goes for Paul Whitehouse, who voices William Van Dort, Mayhew, and Paul the head waiter, or definitely Joanna Lumley, who I'm a huge fan of from her work in Absolutely Fabulous. She plays the abusive mother of Victoria, Lady Everglot, and she's done way better work in Absolutely Fabulous or other things that she's done. Like there's not a lot of personality to her performance, and I know that actress is very capable of playing like very slimy, evil characters, but with a lot of personality and charm. And I just didn't really get that vibe or that overall feel from her voiceover for this. It was very one note kind of stuff. Albert Finney, similar sort of stuff with his performance as Lord Everglot and the grandfather Everglot, or Richard E. Grant as Barkus, or, Christopher Lee. It was fun to see him and hear him voice the priest, or the pastor, but he's not really in it a lot. Michael Gough, um, Alfred from Batman, Burton's Batman, and he was also in Sleepy Hollow. He was great as the Elder. You got Jane Horrocks, who voices the Black Widow Spider, and Mrs. Plum, a dead chef who works at the Ball and Socket pub. You've got Ann Reitel, voices the maggot, and the town crier. Um, you got Deep Roy, who voices General Bones Apart. Danny Elfman, who voices Bone Jangles, who, you know, does a great job in terms of voicing the character and doing a lot of the musical stuff. And I want to give Danny some extra credit because he said in interviews that this voiceover in particular really wrecked his voice. So I want to give him some extra kudos for, putting that amount of effort into his voiceover performance. That really shows how passionate he was in terms of bringing that character to life. Now, the cinematography by Pete Kozaczek and the editing by Jonathan Lucas and Chris Lebenson, it's it's fine for a stop motion animated film. Like, it definitely is very consistent in terms of its quality. There's definitely a lot of skill that you see on the screen, but it's also not anything that I would probably say, in comparison to other films, is really quite tremendous by any means, or one of a kind, but it's still good. It's good work by talented and skilled um, members of the overall production. Now, the music by Danny Elfman is not really one of my favorite scores of his. It's very repetitive. He even used some of the same refrains that he did from in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he used some of the same refrains that he uses in this. So he recycled notes from another score. And I don't know if he did this one first and then did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or it's vice versa. But either way, there should be no recycling going on here. And it just sounds like a very generic Elfman score. Like, that's one thing that's a bit disappointing about Corpse Bride for me, is that the score is just so forgettable. It's fine, and I think some of the musical number pieces, like Remains of the Day, like, that's a really catchy beat and tune, and that's actually quite great. But there's other stuff that's just it just sounds like B-roll or B-side stuff that Elfman did, or like unused takes from other scores that he's already done. Like, it just wasn't anything that I felt was really that particularly impressive. I feel, in comparison to something like his score in Edward Scissorhands, for instance, like, it's no contest, or his work in Nightmare Before Christmas. I know a lot of people really like this score, but I just didn't really find it to be anything that was that impressive overall, except for maybe a couple songs or maybe a note or two. Um, but at the end of the day, I did like the film. I think that it's a good movie. It definitely does help that it's pretty short, so it's not one of those things where it feels like it goes on too long. But it's not one of my favorites, though. I know for a lot of people, it is one of their favorites, but not for me. But I do like it. It's got its heart in the right place. There's some fun animation. There's some good voiceover work. The direction is, for the most part, really solid. And Yeah, there definitely are some moments where the Burton aesthetic and the overall stop motion animation is definitely quite the sight to behold in this. But I just wish it had a little bit better of a script and a story and better musical numbers and just other things about it that were just a little bit better overall. But for the most part, still relatively satisfying and still relatively fun to watch. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Corpse Bride, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.